told you the Doc Bookshop went all the way over Cedar Hill, because the Doc Bookshop works North Texas. We try to have representation throughout North Texas. It is a labor of love. We've been around since 2008, so we're going into our 17th year in the same location. I'm like, oh my God, where my hand claps at? It's been an extraordinary experience, right? And so we're happy to be in such a beautiful space. The library opened last year, and we've been fortunate to do a lot of events with the library prior to them opening up. So we created a long relationship with the library over our 16 years, and all the different areas that they've done events, we have worked alongside this library. And so we are just so happy that we can have this relationship to bring you some dynamic authors. And ever since they opened up this new location, it was just a great partnership. Currently, the Doc Bookshop is a full-service bookstore in Fort Worth, like I said, and we sell audiobooks, ebooks. We have our QR code if you want any audiobooks or ebooks, and you can connect to us on Instagram. I don't even know what's next or whatever. I think we went on the Blue Sky. I don't even know. I can't even keep up with all this stuff. I know we do Facebook, okay? Everything else that came after that, I think is okay. If you find us out there, I have some great social media people. We have several partnerships. We do, of course, the library. We work a lot with the museum, the Dallas Museum of Art, and a lot of different bookstores. We are a part of the American Booksellers Association. We are a part of the Mountain Planting Independent Booksellers Association. We have a high representation of African American books, but we also claim the mission of building geographical representation. We found that a lot of books, they promote a lot of bookstores from the East Coast and West Coast, and they're about to big state in the middle. So I told them I am go inward and celebrate our Texas authors, so not only African American representation, but geographical representation. So I'm excited about that journey we've been on for the past 5 years. It's a great addition to our section in our bookstore called The Middle West, and was able to win the Spur Awards. You're like, what the heck you doing with Spur Awards up in Montana or whatever, Wyoming, but they gave us some funding for building out their region of the West area. So it's a great opportunity for us. I don't want to hold you long, but I do want to. This is a great experience, and these are some dynamic authors that are going to dive into history. But I believe history can fix contemporary issues. I am actually wearing pink today. This is not by chance I'm wearing pink, but they had a pink out in Fort Worth, right? The pink out was for the young little girl that was murdered in Fort Worth. Her name was Armania, and it is all over the media. And I was like, I am going to get involved, and I am going to join that pink out because we need to protect and save our children. And I said, well, Lisa Wingate here and what she's done with her, but this is a great opportunity. So we stand with the families that want to protect the community that wants to save and protect the children. So I stand here today to wear my pink in honor of this little girl that's been all over the news across the country, just a crossfire. It's sad. I don't want to go into deep details because I want our energy to just understand that we're here today to just celebrate the authors and what they've accomplished in history and culture and what they can teach us today. I get the opportunity before I go to introduce Alice. Alice is going to share a poem, this amazing poem that Vanessa wrote, and then I'll come back and do the intro and then the rock and roll.
Ode to Black women. Black woman, you're the dopest. Eyes full of love, light mixed with sorrow. Always finding reasons to hope for a better tomorrow. Black woman, you're the chillest. No crystal stairs, no silver spoons. You don't play. You find a way. make a way, become the way. Black woman, you're the wind beneath wings. For love, you make mountains move. Clothed in God's grace, with nothing to prove. Black woman, you are beauty defined. With sun-kissed skin, seen it all, brown eyes. Problems on every side. From this too, you rise. Black woman, you are the prize. God made you glow. With style you strut, let 'em know. Ain't nothing like a strong black woman. By our very own Vanessa Miller.
What a wonderful
I
thing.
started off writing poems when I was 9 years old, and I haven't written one in a very, very long time. But when I was writing this book, it just felt like I wanted to add something to it, which was just an ode to Black women because, you know, we go through a lot, but we still rise.
I'm happy you brought that up. I told this story first about Armani, and then I had her read the Ode to Black Woman, because if we look at that story, she had a friend. She had one of her best friends. Her name was Cheyenne. Cheyenne was a little Caucasian white girl that I love you. She didn't even understand that her best friend was murdered. All she knew is that this best friend, her dad, celebrated Daddies and Donuts Day with her. And so Cheyenne, that little girl's best friend, this little white girl is going to be able to tell her story in years to come. So it is women building relationships, young women that transcend color, all these boundaries, that saw that this group invited me into Daddies and Donuts Day when my dad was not present. And the dad came out and said, I don't care what this man's issue is the fact he stood up for my child when I wasn't there. They created a bond, and that bond will last probably beyond us until that story of that little girl today. Cheyenne will tell her story of her best friend, Armani. So those are the relationships that we're building today. That's the relationship that was built when we knew this month. And so we're happy to continue a relationship. But now I am here ready to turn it over to Lisa Wingate, because Vanessa Miller and Lisa Wingate, two of subject authors, engaged in a compelling conversation on Lisa's first story, her story of month. Vanessa, forthcoming now, okay, you guys. It does not actually release till tomorrow. But we in Texas, we are going to say that we are very special because we got it before we release it, right? So that's forthcoming. I love the building station. You know, we, the narratives of two sisters navigated the Colossians 1921 Tulsa Race Master as they escaped along and becoming the iconic Route 66. I'm gonna go down my history thing of celebrating Route 66 and 10 celebration. I'll let that go. They find solace at the filling station, their refuge in the discriminatory Jim Crow America. And we have Lisa Wingate, Shelterwood Chronicles of brave women pioneers who valiantly shielded children from the powerful land baron Sheffield after oil riches. This conversation between the two authors forms a honest blend that is sure to captivate readers. I know you guys are going to be happy about this conversation. Let's give a round of applause for these people.
Well, hey, you guys, thanks for coming out, first of all. This was a late addition to Vanessa's tour, was already planned, and all of a sudden I got a text from Vanessa, and she said, "You want me to come to Dallas? You know, could you come do this event? Because they want to do one at the library." And luckily I was here because I just can't think of anywhere I would rather be than here to help launch this book into the world. Vanessa and I have been friends now for a few years, since, I don't know, I guess I read something good early, right?
2022.
Yeah, and to give it an endorsement quote, people always ask me what I'm reading. Usually they say I'm reading something before it comes out. Early books, so I do a quote. So we met through that, and the thing about reading someone's books is you get such a sense of who the author is, who that person is that's behind the book as you're getting to know the characters. Because you can't write something that's not part of you. And so I knew I liked her before I met her. But then she was coming to San Antonio just because I love just the spirit of that book, something good and the lesson behind it. And then she was coming to San Antonio to a conference, a writer's conference down there where I was speaking. So we got to get together and meet for real. By then she had written American Queen, and I had gotten to be part of that book's early journey. And
she's not telling you the reason I wrote American Queen is because she gives me the endorsement for something good. So I go back to say thank you. So you always want to go back and say thank you to people who do something for you. Because I was just coming back into traditional publishing. And when I was in publishing before, I didn't need endorsements. And so all of a sudden I needed endorsements. And I tried to think, who do I want to ask? And I didn't know Lisa at the time, but I knew I admired her work. And so I reached out. I told her I'm just coming back into traditional publishing, you know, I need an endorsement. And she wrote back and she said, I understand I understand you need a hand up. And she was like, I've been there. Send me the book. And so I sent her the book. She gives me the endorsement on something good. But when I go back to say thank you, she tells me about a Facebook friend had sent her information about the Kingdom of the Happy Land. And she says, Vanessa, you live in North Carolina, you might want to research this. Well, I had never imagined I was going to become a historical fiction writer. When I decided I was coming back to traditional publishing, I wanted to come back and write women's fiction. That was it, that was all. That was what I wanted to do because historical fiction takes a lot of work. A lot of research. And I didn't wrap my brain around doing that. So I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm writing women's fiction. But this story, when I started researching it, I was like, oh my God, I have to write this. So she changed my whole career. Just by saying thank you. And then, so what happens when we meet in San Antonio? Are you gonna tell them?
So I was in early in the period because I didn't know she was gonna go in there. I was just like, hey, I'm gonna pass this thing along. This needs to be written by a black writer, and you're from North Carolina, and you're a woman. It's a woman's story. Like you are, this would be it. So then when you had written it, I heard from you couldn't endorse it. So I, read it early and endorsed it. So for us, somebody had told this story. And so then we met down here for breakfast. She's like, I want to buy you breakfast because you helped me American Queen and everything. So we met down here for breakfast.
We're just eating.
And
I'm thinking, okay, I've got the American Queen coming out. I got to figure out what I'm going to do next. And then what happened?
So there's this thing, because I'm a history nerd. I watch all those nerdy shows with, weird historical things, mysteries in the museum and all that. So I had seen a story on the free filling station and how it was about the only place where black travelers could fill their car safely and get some food and things. And so this man, Mr. Freed, realized the need to develop that, and a restaurant next door, and pretty soon they had a baseball field out back, and there was then a Negro Leagues played baseball out back in this place, and they had dances, and they had all these things, and I was telling her all this at breakfast, I'm like, somebody needs to write about this. So that's what happened. And that's what became the filling station. And so she has actually helped my career with 2 books. Now, I have never received star reviews from Library Journal and Publisher Weekly, Book List, and them. They have reviewed my books. I have a lot of books out. They've always been, generous with the review and said nice things about my book, but never have they ever given me a star review. And as a writer, you kind of want a star review. This book received 2 star reviews. Wow! It received 1 from Library Journal and another one from Book List.
so I'm reading now, I'm waiting, I'm like, okay, maybe tomorrow when the book releases, I'll get another star review. No, but this is what Lisa Wingate has done for me in my career, and so I'm always shouting her praises, and I'm very, very thankful for you.
Well, I'm thankful for the friendship comments. And she's not, well, so she was when I was in North Carolina, she came and did the opposite of this when Shelter was released, so she was the interviewer. But somewhere in there, you did say you kind of cursed my name when you wrote this book.
This one here? Yeah. The filling station was hard for me to write at first. The filling station, no, seriously, this is the only book I've written a lot of books. This is the only book an editor of mine has said. As a matter, after writing American Queen, so I turned in the filling station because, it had to be turned in. And she said, Vanessa, you can't do this after the American Queen. And I was like, okay, I know, it's not right. It needs more work. And I struggled with the filling station because the beginning of the book, it is hard to read about a massacre. So just imagine months of studying about this massacre so that you could write the book. And what was my saving grace was when I found out, as I kept researching, and I discovered how they rebuilt this area and how they became even bigger and better than they were in 1921. So 1925, a parade comes down with Greenwood announcing that they're back in business. And when I discovered this parade, I sat and I watched it. And then when I went to Greenwood and I read the victims, the survivor statements, and I read what the people were saying, that then became my inspiration. And then I was able to really get in there and write this book because I knew then I was taking my reader on a journey of resilience because they were some resilient people. So the book is a hopeful book. And once I was able to get that, I was okay.
She forgave
She forgave me. It is so good, you guys. You are just in for a journey. I did bring some actual questions. Okay, so we already did the first one. Why did you write about the race massacre? That's not around. Stories are different depending on the lens that the storyteller can tell us them. So when I first read about the Greek filling station, I was thinking of just a community that formed around something so simple as a filling station, and that they then saw the need for restaurants, so they put in a restaurant. They then saw the need for people to be able to kind of stop over and hang out, so they kind of added the juke joint. And then, added baseball fields. And so, I was thinking, that really touched me because I grew up in my young years moving all over the place for my dad's jobs. And so we sort of were always a little bit on the outside of that sense of community. We didn't have that sense of a hometown, and I miss that. But when you wrote about it, you tied it to a different lens, a different event in your life, which you write about in the letter that's up in front of the book. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that event and how you felt the connection through that to what the priest did.
So in June of this year was 50 years to the date of when I almost drowned. So I almost was not here. You would not have seen me. This would be an invisible spot because I almost drowned when I was 6 years old. And a man named Sergeant John Clark saved my life. He jumped in the river and pulled me out. And I was in the hospital for a while because they were pulling sand out of my nose because I had been under for so long. They said it took about 13 minutes to revive me. And so in June of this year, I reread accounts of that because it was in the first time I was ever in a newspaper. I was 6 years old. But because I almost drowned. And so I thought about the fact that there was someone there to save me when I needed help and couldn't help myself. And writing the filling station, the thing about it was Greenwood needed help that night and that morning, and no one was there to help them. They, the police actually deputized citizens to go into Greenwood, and this is how they were able to get the airplanes that came through Greenwood and dropped bombs on the homes. They burnt the homes down, and the police did not come to save them that night or to stop any of it because they were a part of it. And the DOJ just released their report after 103 years. They just released a report admitting that the police were a part of what happened in Greenwood. And so the filling station, though, became that safe haven for some who escaped the Tulsa Race Massacre. And that was what I was wanting to write and portray with the people from the filling station. Hello, Ms. Michelle Simpson. AAOT for life. That was part of a group that we were all in. And Shawanda reminded me today that it's been 20 years since we were in AAOT. And so she said we need a reunion tour. So that was why the 3 filling station became this safe haven for my characters in the book, and they needed a safe haven, and so that was why I chose to do it like that.
I thought it was, like I said, so interesting. It was such an example of how, the lens the storyteller is looking through affects what you see.
Yes.
So the chapter, speaking of kind of something that gives us another lens, are the historical quotes that begin each chapter. Each chapter begins with a real historical quote. So many of them struck me, including quotes from the Red Cross reports where they're saying things like, well, we provided the women with materials so they could help themselves instead of their own clothes. And we provided some construction materials so the people of Greenwood could get their friends to come and help them rebuild houses. And particularly one survivor who said she went into a hospital and there were so many people shot in different ways in that hospital that she thought, am I in France, meaning World War I?
Yes.
So tell me how you selected the quotes, where you found them, why you included them on your story.
Yes. That was another hard part of writing the book. When I found the Red Cross Relief Report of 1921, I thought, yes, I've got a gem. This is going to help me with this book. And instead, it angered me. It really did, because this report said that Black people were a servant class of people, and they will work for whatever relief they receive. It also stated, see, they didn't understand that after 100 years, your words I can use in whichever way I choose. And so they didn't know someone named Vanessa Miller was going to come around and I was going to put your words in a book and let people see what you said about us. And it was hurtful to me, because here are people who their whole world has been destroyed. Everything they know, they're living in tents outside of their house to repair their homes. And the Red Cross normally, FEMA, Red Cross, we recognize this now. When they come in after a disaster, they normally give you money, they give you all the supplies you need, and they say in this Red Cross Relief Report, normally in a disaster such as this, we give money or loans to help the people. And they said this was the only time we didn't do this. And I leave you to answer why they didn't do it. They made them dig their them, so they actually lived in a contaminated area, and many of them became sick because they had to rebuild everything on their own. You need a pillow? Well, they gave you needle and thread, and they gave
A chicken.
basically. So they had to make the clothes for their children. Your child needs to go to school and your child needs books. Well, the child has to work for the books that they receive to even be able to go to school. They found some type of job for that child to do just to give them books. And these people are coming out of a devastation, and they couldn't give them a moment to rest their mind. But what did Greenwood do? They rose anyway. I was so, all I could do in my office several days was just sit there and applaud these people because they had the kind of grit that we need when we're going through something. They said, oh, no insurance money, because this is what happens with all the insurance money that we pay. You see what just happened in California, right? Where all their homes burned and then their insurance companies refused to pay out, right? Because insurance is not in the business of really paying out like for a devastation, because then they would be devastated. And so they just make up reasons not to pay you. And this is the same thing that happened in Greenwood. They would not pay out for the insurance money, so they had no insurance money. The mayor was trying to rezone them while they're living in their tents and trying to rebuild, trying to clear out all of the debris. He was trying to sell the land to a developer. And I show you in the book how they were even able to overcome that. These people were resilient. This is a story that I believe you will be rooting for the people as you're reading it.
So I don't think I mentioned, after we moved all around as kids, I grew up in Tulsa,
Yes.
well, outside of Tulsa, but I don't remember this ever being mentioned from second grade through college. I don't remember ever hearing it mentioned. The only thing I knew was that a little bit of something happened down there, and that was because people I knew who were in the Black Radio Association, and who I knew mostly through course events and things. You know, sometimes you would hear people who lived out in Muskogee or Colitas or Sepulpa say, you know, they left after the trouble in North Tulsa, and that's how their families had ended up a generation or two later out in these outlying towns. And so it was just one of those things, like I never knew why. I just knew there was some sort of mass exodus when people left North Tulsa, and I never, now I know why. I mean, I knew why when they started, you know, investigating in the last few decades, but all those years I never heard anything about it. So we're over 100 years past now, but why do you think it's still relevant? It's still important that the investigations go on. It's still important that the numbers are counted as much as they can be. Why does it still matter?
I think it still matters because the descendants of this massacre are still looking for reparations. The survivors tried to receive reparations, but just as the Red Cross, wouldn't provide any money or loans to the people for this devastation, neither has the city, the state ever provided any reparations for what was done. And so I think that is still important to know that they lost something. They had built a town of wealthy people. They were homeowners, they were business owners. There was Lola Williams. She was a woman in Greenwood who she did better business than some of the men. She owned Dreamland Theater, and it was a 750 seater theater. And she also owned a confectionery shop. And people would come from all over to go to this Dreamland Theater and to attend just whatever shows she had going on there. She was a powerhouse in this city. And after the massacre, she went into a depression. And to me, they owe something for the things that they did. This woman was a powerhouse. The massacre ends 1921. They rebuild in 1925. And I say that this is a great story of them rebuilding. But by 1927, Lola Williams is dead. And she dies in an insane asylum because she couldn't get over what had been done. And so I believe that this book is important for this day because it, for one, shows us how to get through even times like we're dealing with now. But also, I hope it helps to tell the reader or show the reader, when you go through something that may be tough, get back up. You know, that's what we have to do. We have to keep getting back up. And so that's why I think it's an important book, even for now.
So that segues really well into my next question, which was, part of, as a storyteller, what changes the story is whose eyes you decide to look at in terms of characters, right? And so this story is a different story if it's told from the three men who were kind of the pillars of Greenwood, the founders of Greenwood. It's a different story if it's told maybe for a 6-year-old child who gets separated from parents and has to flee the massacre. So you chose a pair of sisters,
Yes.
who are right kind of like at the cusp of their father's a successful businessman. One has just graduated from college, one's about to graduate from high school. Like they're right, the world is their oyster. They're right at the cusp of all these great things that are going to happen in their lives, and then the massacre happens and turns their lives upside down. And they react to it very differently. Their reactions are kind of a study in PTSD and trauma and how people react. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about why you chose them and how you got it, in my opinion, so right about the different ways people react to an event that's so traumatic.
So I used 2 fictional characters to tell a story about a real event, but I do bring in some of the real people. Like you mentioned, the pillars, O.W. Gurley. He's the one who purchases this land and then begins to sell pieces of it to other black people to be able to build their homes and businesses there. J.D. Stratford, he's the one, he loans money to people in this community so that they can build a business. Then there was the newspaper man who they ran out of town as well so that they wouldn't be able to rebuild. But I decided to use Margaret and Evelyn instead of Lola Williams, or would you see her in the book, instead of, O.W. Gurley, because I wanted to be able to tell this story from the perspective of 2 women who were just at the beginning of their lives, having everything, and the reason it mattered to me was because of one survivor's story that I read. And I was standing there in Greenwood, and I read as she said, we were, just at the beginning of our lives. She said we were getting ready. She was getting ready to go off to college. But after this happened, there was no college anymore. And so I thought about that, and I wanted people to understand that this was an area where the people were able to send their kids off to college and things like that. Their kids were thinking about businesses because this is what they saw when they, as they were growing up. This was not, an area where they did not understand influence and affluence. And I wanted then the reader to see when it was all taken away and how they rebuild from that. So that's why I decided to use those 2 people to tell this story, because I kept thinking back to the one victim statement that I read.
So did you pull their reactions from victim narratives, like from survivor narratives of how they reacted to what happened? Because the two sisters react very, very differently.
Correct. I wanted, well, you know, and you're right, I wanted to show you PTSD. And so I used Evelyn to show, because PTSD is a real thing. And, sometimes people look at someone who's going through something in life, they probably weren't there for the traumatic event that happened, but they look at this person and they wonder, why can't she or he get it right? Why can't they get over this or that? Because PTSD is real. And sometimes someone who was on a total different path, everything changes for them. And they don't know how to cope with it. And so I use Evelyn for that. And I just wanted to use her for it because I knew that this story needed that. And so I was like, okay, Evelyn's gonna just take the brunt of that. So a lot of our readers are like, she's a brat. And then they say, but I understand her. But people, we do look at them and think, oh, they're just being so bratty. But we don't know what they went through. And so Margaret, I knew that there was resilience in this community because how else could they have rebuilt as they did with very little help, imagine do we have any builders in here? None. So if I actually bring you wood and nails and I say, oh, have at it, build your home, could you do it? No. Okay, so that is actually what happened to the people of Greenwood. So the Red Cross did bring them the wood and nails, and so they feel like, oh, the Red Cross helped us. They brought us the material, and then they said, oh, get some of your friends to help you build your home. Oh, who's a home builder here? That's actually not my career field. They had to become home builders. They had to become construction workers in order to get their homes rebuilt because that was all they were willing to do for them. They would not bring anyone to help them build their homes. So it is, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap with just something a little fun-ish. There was a commonality through my life, shelter was an
I was just going to ask about, before you ask about the commonality between shelter women, I would like you to tell everyone about this book because I read it when it was first coming out and I was amazed. I sat there reading this book and I could not believe that this actually happened in this America that we live in. There's so much that has happened in this country that we don't know about, because it's, 100 years ago, and they're happy that it was 100 years ago, and they're like, yay, we got away with that. And then along comes Lisa Wingate and tells the story. So can you tell us a little bit about Shelter Woods?
So Shelter Woods is another little very big piece of Oklahoma history, and I came across it by accident, like the pre-film vision. And it was one of those things, again, nobody ever told me about in my childhood when we lived in Oklahoma. But at statehood, the whole eastern half of the state was the reservation lands of the 5 tribes, so Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole, and also they were freedmen because they were freedmen and women. They were slave owners before the Civil War, so after the Civil War, you also have freedmen's towns in these territories, and part of their settlement after the Civil War was the freedmen were taken into the tribes and got tribal memberships in whatever of those 5 tribal nations. So at the turn of the century, when statehood is happening, the tribal nations are broken up and land allotments are given to every man, woman, and child who's on the tribal rolls. Very quickly, grafters figure out they can come in and get guardianships over especially the children, especially the orphans who own land, because there's oil found under all this land. So it becomes like the new gold rush, go into Oklahoma, get guardianships over these children. Actually, the first lands released to be alienable that could be bought and taken over by guardians are the freedmen's lands. So the freedmen's lands and the lands of freedmen children go first, and then children, orphans, et cetera, et cetera. So I never, and there was one little 5-foot tall Irish woman who was elected as statesman by the widest majority on the ballot. Even though women couldn't vote, she was by far the most popular politician in the state, and she found out about it, and she flat went to war on behalf of these children who were being abused, neglected, starved, killed by their guardians, because the guardians just wanted to take their money. So yeah, that's what Shelter was about. So one of the players in the story who went to war in conjunction with Kate Bernard and made a difference were the women's clubs, which at that time, at the turn of the century, around 1900, were all the rage in some circles. It was a new thing. It was all the scandal in other circles that women would leave the house in the middle of the day, unchaperoned by male relatives, to go gather with other women and talk about politics and reading and civic projects. The scandal, really. I mean, it was a thing. So I was thrilled when I saw that in the filling station, the Black Women's Club, actually, I was in McAllister speaking kind of where Shelter was set, and the women's clubs came and they gave me 1910 yearbook from the Fortnightly Club, which I thought was so sweet of them, a historian for the women's clubs. And I had an extra one. Do you want it? I was like, do I want it? I'm going to touch this in 1910 when we went to the club meeting. There's a funny quote about, you probably found something like that, but, well, actually, it kind of happens in the book, in the filling station. There's a funny quote about, if women wore long dresses then, if it was raining or whatever, and they would not go to church, or they would not go to a funeral or whatever, but it didn't matter what the weather was on Women's Club Day. They were going to the Women's Club meeting. So that kind of happens in the story. So I thought, I just would like to hear you talk a little bit about what you learned about the Black Women's Clubs and what influence they had. Obviously in the story they are part of rebuilding Greenwood.
Absolutely. They had a women's club in Greenwood, and what they did, at this time, 1925, Greenwood is back in business, but people are afraid to come to Greenwood because of the massacre. And so they're trying to get people to understand that Greenwood is now safe. And you can come back here because people travel from all over to come to Greenwood. So before Booker T. Washington passes away in 1915, he dubs Greenwood Negro Wall Street. And so you hear the term today as Black Wall Street. And so this is a place of Black Wall Street, and they're back in business, but nobody is coming. And so this women's club, they decide to go to, Booker T. Washington is no longer alive, but his successor, Morton, his name begins with an M, so forgive me, but his successor, each year they pick a town to have their convention in. And so these women decide to go to the convention and to lobby them to come to Greenwood with the next convention, because they know if they can show that things are safe, and if they come for this convention, it will open things back up. And so they do that. When I talked about the parade that comes down Greenwood, that is because this women's club were able to convince Booker T. Washington's organization to have their convention in Greenwood in 1925. And so they don't just have a convention, they do a parade coming down the street. And then the thing about this convention that was so good to me, the same men let me back up. So the governor, the mayor, other people in Tulsa and Oklahoma, none of them really wanted to help Greenwood, but as they, rebuild, they come to this convention and they stand there, and I say they had to look out at them and say, how great y'all are. nothing can destroy you. Because here they were rebuilt. And so what the mayor of Tulsa then, he stands up and he declares that there will be no more racial violence in Tulsa because everybody loves everybody. And the reason he had to do that, because newspaper reporters and everything came from all over to this convention. And so they wanted it in the papers because Tulsa became a stench to other areas. Nobody wanted to do business with them. Tulsa wanted to, they're this big oil town. They wanted to be known as this great city, great place in America. Well, the two men we talked about earlier, as they arrest them and they make bail and they leave town. Well, they try to get them extradited from each city that they go to, and no one would help them. No one would extradite these men back to Tulsa so that they could face a trial and be blamed for a massacre that white men coming into Greenwood created. Well, they wanted to blame it on J.B. Stratford and Smitherman, the newspaper man. And the thing about it, so Tulsa knew real quick that America, you know how they say, we're not fooling with you. They knew real quick that America was not fooling with them because each town that these two men went to, they tried to get them extradited. And they was like, oh no, we're not doing that. We don't like y'all. so then they come to this convention and they're like, oh, there's no more racial violence because we love everybody. We all just want peace. And so that right there, I laughed as I read it because I was like, okay, I know exactly what that is about. If you heard them where the dollar is, then they really quickly, they find their love for you. So that's the position Tulsa was in at that moment.
I love that scene, or the parade,
Yes.
and everything, that was great. I love that the women's clubs were the right word for it. So questions? I want to make sure we have some time for questions. Any questions? Y'all don't be shy.
I have a question. I actually have two questions, but I'll choose one. Thank you so much. My question is, it is believed that one of the challenges in getting reparations for some of the Tulsa survivors is because folks see it as something that happened so long ago. But when you start, for me, my connection to history is always through like my family members. For example, my great grandmother was born in 1913. So I just wonder, as you did your research and began to build out your characters, did you think about your own lineage in relation to who was alive while this was happening?
I don't think I thought much about my own family with this one because I knew my family was from New Orleans. And this happened in Tulsa. And so what I mainly thought about really was just Black people in general. Because of the stories that I was reading in the Red Cross Relief Report, it really offended me for Black people because I know we are hardworking people. I know that we strive to do well and to do well for our children, and we are not seen as that. We, even to this day, no matter how much we have accomplished, we still have the skin that we're in. And so that was what I was thinking about more so than my own family, was just in general. And so my heart kind of bled for us in general. And I still pray for a day when that changes.
Why did you do two sisters instead of two brothers?
Come on, woman. Well, as I told you I decided to come back and write women's fiction. So I said, okay, I'm gonna write this historical, but I still wanted to center it as women's, a woman's historical fiction. And so that's why it wasn't written as if it was O.W. Gurley, J.B. Stratford, which you could have easily done that because they were the pillars of that area. But they also left before the rebuild, and I wanted to tell that story of the rebuild.
There's a really good man in the story though. I was
Elijah.
gonna love him.
All right, so, two things. The first one's just kind of a thought. I wonder, first of all, let me just say I appreciate you, even on the panel right now, referencing it as what it was. It was a massacre. People
Absolutely.
have recorded it as a riot,
No,
as
it was
a
a massacre.
uprising. It was a massacre, so the language matters. The second thing is I wondered if in the research, because this is just one, there were many massacres
There were.
just like this all over the United States that people never even heard about. This was the biggest one, but it was not the only one. So I wondered if you came across those other ones and if the research in those other massacres informed this work.
I read about one in Williamsburg, North Carolina, Rosewood, but none of them informed this particular project because there was still so much for me to find in, about Greenwood. And so I just wanted to stick with that. And earlier today at the lunch, someone asked me if I would write about Rosewood next, and I told her, one massacre is enough for me. And so I'm gonna leave those other ones to another writer because it was really hard, getting through that. And so when I'm writing something, I want to deliver the best story possible. So then I really have to dig into it. And so I'm not gonna do another massacre anytime soon. Yes, I've been finding other things to write about.
It's a challenge to take something as awful as that and create a world that people can stand to live in for 365 pages. That's one of the things that's so amazing about this book is somewhere you take that whole situation and find hope in it, resilience in it, and, encouragement in it. And so it sounds so dire, and it is dire in the beginning, but,
Yes.
you kind of show that things come out of it, like things we go through and get stronger.
But I do believe the other ones need to be written, and Michelle Stimson is a writer, so, maybe you'll take one of those on. Not me.
So Vanessa, when you were doing your research for this book, I remember reading a story or an article that the whole incident, massacre, started behind a black male, white woman sort of relationship. Did you run across that in your research, and do you have?
Absolutely, it wasn't a relationship, it was, his name was Nick Rollins, he worked at a shoe shine, guy in front of a building, and he goes into this building and goes into the elevator, and they say the white woman said he touched her, and I kind of believe him. Maybe the elevator jerked, maybe he bumped into her, I don't know. But even if he did touch her, all of this didn't have to happen. And so the woman, she leaves town, and so they never get any information from her, and they actually release him from prison, not prison, they release him from jail about the day after. But what happens is, white men go down to the jail to hang him. And so black men then, they get their guns and they go down to the jail also because they say, we're not gonna let this happen. And the reason why they believed that the white men were going to the jail to hang him was because not long before this, a white man had robbed a cab driver. He was in the Tulsa jail, and white men went and pulled him out and they took him and hung him. And his name was Roy. I have it in the book, his last name, but the first name was Roy. And so Smitherman, the newspaper man, he warned the people in Tulsa about this after it happened, because he stated in his newspaper column, if they could so easily extract justice on a white man, what do you think they will do to a black man in a Tulsa jail? So that's why when these black men go down there and there becomes this, now that's the riot that happens earlier in the day between these two groups of men. So they do kind of like fight it out here by the Tulsa jail. They think everything has quieted down, but they are offended that these black men have the nerve to come down there to stop them from hanging this young gentleman.
You mentioned earlier that history has a way of helping us to answer and solve questions today and problems today. So as you think about the research that you've done and how you dealt with the characters, how can that help us today as we're dealing with all of the influence or the antagonism toward DEI? And we know that there is a need for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it doesn't help just people of color, it helps everyone. So how can we use that information to message what's going on today?
Well, here's the thing. So while Black Wall Street was going on and people were, making money, they were owning homes, they were doing good business, this all happened during Jim Crow. So black people are no stranger to times when, it gets a little tough for us. But when that happens, we find a way. And they found a way in Black Wall Street. They built their own businesses and they supported their own businesses. So my take on it is, okay, you don't want me over here, then let me go over there, which is the same thing that they did in Greenwood and other areas. Black people during Jim Crow, they could work in white areas, like, maybe someone worked as maids or something like this, but then they came and they brought their money back to the community that they lived in, and that's how the community prospered. So I truly believe spend your money where it is appreciated, and that's what they did during Jim Crow.
It's more of a personal question because I grew up reading Black history and my mom made sure that I knew about like a lot of inventors and people that a lot of people don't talk about. And now that I'm older, I'm overwhelmed. So when you talk about stocking, like I'm part of the book club, and just last month they did a slavery book, and I was like, okay, I'm still overwhelmed. How did you continue going? Because I, again, knew about the Tulsa Massacre when I was very young, and it was really hard to keep going, especially because it's like after slavery and after all of those things, and then now we have this, it's like it's literally nonstop, and it's to the point where I haven't read, like I really want to get your book, but when I read it about the Tulsa Massacre, I was like, okay, I just put it out the slavery book, last month, I don't think I'll make it through this one either.
Here's the thing. I truly believe that those who don't know their history, you're not necessarily doomed to repeat it. But if things are being done to you and you don't know the history of why certain things are happening, then you might think, oh, well, that's okay. Just like I'm telling you about how the Red Cross just refused to help them. You don't know that history. and then you're in a devastation in your area, and they refuse to help with certain things. Now you know why. Because they're not gonna necessarily tell you to your face, oh, it's because you're Black. But now you know why, and then you can stand up and object to that. So I just really believe that this history is important, because, and I'm sorry, Black people, we just don't, if you're gonna have Black authors writing about historical events, they're just not really gonna be all that, skipping through the tulips and all this, happiness. They just really aren't. They actually stole us from Africa, brought us over to America in chains. And that is what really happened to us. And we have never had equality in America. And so we're not gonna be able to sing you that, lovely song. I'm gonna have to tell you the truth. And but what I try to do in my books, because I don't want to, depress someone and make you just start thinking about, oh Lord. So I try to find the hopefulness in the story, because I do believe that there is hope, and the hope that I've always found in our history is the resilience of Black people, because we've had to be resilient. We've had to find a way when there was no way, and that's just the simple truth of it. So I do hope you will give the civilization a try. I readily admit that the beginning of the book is not going to be a good day for you. But if you keep reading, you will then see the hope and the inspiration that I'm trying to deliver in this book, because I couldn't write it without writing about the massacre. And so, but how I begin the book is I want you to see Greenwood in all its glory. So at first I show you these two young women walking through Greenwood and just going about their day. Because the thing about it is, the massacre happens on May 31st. And that day was graduation preparation day. And so the students thought that they were going to be graduating the next day on June 1st. But I show you while they're at graduation and they're sent home. And they think, okay, it's a little dust up, but we're still graduating tomorrow. And so I show you a story about how life can change like that. And so, but then what do we do about it? So it does get hopeful. You just have to, and I only do the massacre in a few chapters, because I didn't want to drag you through a whole book and then at the end you see the massacre. So I wanted to do it at the beginning and then take you through the rebuild and the hopefulness of the story. So that was how I tried to help my readers.
Thank you. We got one more question over here.
So I'm wondering how you, both of you, Ms. Wingate and Ms. Miller, how do you find these little pieces of history? I mean, for you, the Tulsa Massacre.
I find them from her.
You know,
So we're gonna let her answer that question.
I read the books and I find these obscure events, and you're just like, how do you find those? If you don't have somebody like her telling you, you need to investigate it.
I find them everywhere. Clickbait on the internet, like I'm gonna look. Frog saves woman's life. I'm gonna look like how the frog saves woman's life. People will tell me when I travel, oh, there's a Civil War battleship sunk in our river, there's ghosts or whatever. I'm gonna go see. Can I see the ghosts? I watch history nerd programs. I just texted you about a month ago, and I was like, hey, somebody's right about this, it hasn't been done. So I just nerd out on history, and also Shelterwood was actually, I was finishing the research for the previous book, and I came across a couple things on the internet having to do with these children whose landfill thought they got terrible guardians, and some men who had guardians of like 100 kids and this wars and the terrible thing. Yeah, so I mean, I just came across it on the internet. I love a squirrel trail. You just never know where it'll lead, so I'm always coming across stuff.
And if you haven't read Shelterwood, oh my God, because it really does show you what happened during that time period. I was shocked. I was literally shocked reading the book because I never could imagine something like that, where people would just, pretend to be guardians just so they can steal land. I never heard about that happening. There's a lot of history that we just don't know about. We don't know how evil people can actually be, and they can be evil. And you really need to know, so you watch out for those type of things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're just talking in the first of this about an child is not protected and what happens, and so we need to know these things.
Okay, your closing remarks.
Oh, well, so make sure you get the book, read it, and tell all your friends, and read it in your book clubs, and, yes, you do see the massacre in the first part, but, did I mention there's a man in there that you're just? It's, you just see the resilience of this community, and honestly, I think, we're talking a little bit about why do we need to know the tough history. And something that comes to mind just a little bit to me is my grandmother came from a really tough life. And they were sort of a white trash in town. She had a really tough life. She didn't get to go to school until she was older. But I remember her telling, so she was always telling me stories. I was like, oh, I wish she when I was young. And, but I remember her telling me about Pearl Harbor Day, and how they heard the news come over the radio, and how her kids were playing out front, and her first thought was, oh, I need to go tell, get them out, they shouldn't be playing, this terrible thing has happened, and the kids shouldn't be able to laugh and play. And when 9/11 happened, I went to pick up my kids, and, I never thought about that story again in all those years from my grandson. But when 9/11 happened, I went to pick up my kids from school, and I was sitting on the curb, and there's a ballet studio there, and there's these, you can see the parents are all talking, and all this terrible things happening, There's these 3 little girls in pink tutus twirling down the sidewalk. My first thought was, oh, the parents need to go stop them, these girls shouldn't be twirling down the sidewalk on the stage when these horrible things happen. And then I thought of that story my grandmother told me. You'll get through it, there will be a brighter day, and that's what stories do for us. I think that's what history does for us. It's like this little granola bar that you eat when your soul is just starving and you don't think you can get through to a better day.
And so I would like to thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate this. And I would also like to say, as you read the book, it is very important that you review the book. And that's important for our publishers. They want to see reviews immediately. So if you could review the book, I would greatly appreciate it. And I just thank you, and I hope you find hope in this book and inspiration as you read it, even though I know that it's not going to be easy at the beginning, and I will admit that, but I introduce you to the 3 family. I introduce you to Elijah, as she was talking about. There are so many things I try to bring in the story, which will bring you hope and inspiration. And so that kind of helps you get through the story. So thank you very much.
And before we say that, I want to say, please